In the unforgiving wilderness of the American West, a Christmas blizzard can be a death sentence, but sometimes it can also be a beginning. Imagine a cabin miles from anywhere, a single point of light against a world of white. Inside, a lonely man, hardened by the wild, thinks he's heard a ghost. But the sound comes again, weaker this time. He opens the door, and what he finds on his threshold, a cruel joke delivered by fate and a bitter rival, will change his life, and hers, forever. The wind howled like a wounded beast. It was Christmas Eve in the Wyoming Territory, 1888, and the storm was relentless, driving sheets of snow against the weathered logs of Isaac Thorne's cabin. Inside, the 34-year-old homesteader sat close to his stone fireplace, the flickering light dancing across his rugged features. He was a man made of the same tough timber as his home, solitary and self-sufficient. The storm had ambushed him, forcing him to wrestle his small herd of cattle into the barn just before the sky turned white. He was mending a broken bridle, his calloused fingers working the leather with practiced ease, when he heard it. 3 weak raps against his door, a sound so out of place in the tempest it felt like a trick of the mind. Isaac froze. No one with good intentions would be out in this blizzard. His nearest neighbor was miles away, and even he wouldn't dare face this weather. Cautiously, he grabbed the Winchester rifle propped against the wall. The knocking came again, fainter this time. "Who's there?" he called out, his voice rough from disuse. Silence, just the scream of the wind. Against his better judgment, Isaac lifted the heavy wooden bar and cracked open the door. A blast of ice and snow tore into the cabin, but what he saw made him forget the cold completely. A woman was swaying on his threshold, barely upright. Ice crystals clung to her dark hair, which had tumbled from its pins and hung in frozen strands around a face pale as porcelain. Her dress, a vibrant red silk cheongsam embroidered with golden phoenixes, was soaked through and stiff with frost, a shocking sight in the brutal Wyoming winter. In her hand, she clutched a small bag, her fingers so white they seemed carved from ice. "Please," she whispered in broken English, her lips barely moving. "Help me." Without a second thought, Isaac dropped his rifle and lunged forward, catching her as she collapsed. She weighed almost nothing. He pulled her inside, kicking the door shut against the storm's fury. "Lord Almighty," he muttered, half carrying, half dragging her toward the fire. He laid her on the rag rug before the hearth, her skin as cold as a river stone. He quickly added more wood to the flames, coaxing them to life. The woman's eyes fluttered open. They were dark, almond-shaped, and full of a terror he couldn't yet comprehend before they closed again. Her whole body was racked with violent shivers. "Can you hear me?" He knelt beside her, a sudden wave of helplessness washing over him. He knew how to tend to sick cattle and injured horses, but he'd never had to care for a half-frozen woman in a silk dress. She managed a weak nod, her teeth chattering so hard he feared they might break. "We need to get you warm," Isaac said, his voice firm to hide his uncertainty. He grabbed every blanket he owned from his narrow bed in the corner, then hesitated. Her dress was a cage of ice. She'd never warm up in those wet clothes. He began, clearing his throat. "Your dress, it's got to come off or you'll catch your death." Her eyes flew open, a flicker of alarm in their dark depths. "I'll turn my back," he said quickly, his own face growing warm. "Wrap yourself in these blankets. There's a shirt of mine there, too. It's clean. I promise." "I won't look." For a long moment, he thought she might refuse. Then she gave the slightest nod. Isaac turned to face the wall, studying the rough-hewn logs with intense focus, listening to the rustle of wet fabric and chattering teeth behind him. "I am ready," a weak voice said after what felt like an eternity. He turned to find her huddled in his blankets, the collar of his large flannel shirt visible. Her beautiful dress lay in a sodden heap beside her. Color was already returning to her cheeks. Isaac busied himself making strong black coffee and ladling out a bowl of the stew that had been simmering on the stove. He offered her the tin cup of coffee first. Her hand shook so badly he had to steady it as she brought it to her lips. She sighed as the warmth spread through her. "Thank you," she whispered. "I thought I would die." What in blazes were you doing out in this storm? The question came out harsher than he intended. Fresh tears welled in her eyes. He left me. Isaac handed her the stew and a spoon, settling on the floor at a respectful distance. Eat first, he said gently. Then, if you're willing, you can tell me what happened. As she ate, he noticed her hands, delicate and uncalloused. She was clearly not from this part of the world. When she'd finished, she pulled the blankets tighter. My name is Mai, she said. I come from far away. From China. Her English was halting, but clear. A man? Mr. Fletcher, he arranged for me to come here. He owns the big ranch. Isaac knew the name. Marcus Fletcher owned one of the largest spreads in the territory, a man known for his wealth and his cruelty. He sent for a wife, Mai continued, her voice trembling. He said he wanted a wife for Christmas. A present for himself. She let out a bitter little laugh. When I arrived in Stone Creek this morning, Mr. Fletcher met me. He looked at me, at my dress, and he laughed. He said his friends bet him he wouldn't do it. That ordering a bride from China was the funniest joke they'd ever heard. Her voice broke. He said the joke was over. He brought me as far as the fork in the road, then told me to walk. He pointed and said Stone Creek was that way. A Christmas joke. Isaac's hands clenched into fists. It wasn't snowing hard then, just starting. He said I could make it if I hurried. Then he left me there with my bag and rode off. She looked up at him, the pain in her eyes making his chest tighten. I tried to walk back, but the snow came so fast. I couldn't see the road. Then I saw your light. You did right, Isaac said, his voice a low growl. Any man who'd do that ain't worth spit. Isaac watched the fire, the injustice of it burning in his gut. Fletcher had treated this woman not even as property, but as the punchline to a cruel joke. You can stay here tonight, he said finally. Storm should be over by morning. Then I'll take you to town myself. I have no money, she whispered. We'll figure something out, Isaac said, suddenly aware of how small his cabin felt with 2 people in it. You take the bed. I'll sleep here by the fire. I cannot, she protested. You can and you will, he said firmly. Later, as he lay on the floor listening to the storm rage and her quiet breathing from his bed, Isaac couldn't shake the image of Marcus Fletcher. He didn't know it yet, but he knew this Christmas storm had blown something into his life that would change it forever. The morning light was pale and thin, filtering through frost-covered windows. The Christmas storm had passed, leaving behind a world buried in silence and snow. Isaac woke stiff and sore. Mai was already awake, sitting at his rough-hewn table, her own dress, now dry but wrinkled, put back on over his shirt. Her dark hair was pinned up neatly. Good morning, Isaac said, stretching the kinks from his spine. I made tea, she replied with a weak smile, gesturing to a steaming cup. I hope you do not mind. Help yourself to whatever you need, he said, moving to the stove. In the clear morning light, he could see the faint lines of worry around her eyes and the determined set of her jaw. She held herself with a careful dignity that defied her circumstances. I was not a mail-order bride, she began, as if needing to clear the air. Not in the way you think. My village is very poor. Mr. Fletcher's man came and made promises. A good life in America, a respectable husband. He paid my family a great sum. To them, it was a fortune. To him, she paused, it was the price of a joke. Most folks who come west are running from something, Isaac said gently. Mai nodded. I was running from hunger. I thought I was coming to a new life, a home. I sold the last of my mother's things to have this dress made. I wanted to honor my new husband, to look beautiful for him. It is beautiful, Isaac said gruffly. Fletcher's the fool. They sat in silence for a long moment. What will you do now? Isaac asked. I cannot go back. There is nothing for me there, and my family would be shamed. I have nothing. You could find work in town, Isaac suggested. Mai looked at him, her dark eyes filled with a sad wisdom. Mr. Thorne, I appreciate your kindness. But what work is there for a Chinese woman with no money and no connections in a frontier town? I may be a foreigner, but I am not a fool. He felt a flush of shame. She was right. He stood abruptly, pacing to the window. The world outside was a sea of white, beautiful and unforgiving. His own struggle seemed small compared to hers. He had this land, this cabin, a purpose. She had been stripped of everything. Fletcher is a powerful man, Isaac said, turning from the window. But he is also a coward. To laugh and ride away, he did it because he could. Because he thought no one would ever know or care. The realization seemed to settle over her, a weight heavier than any blizzard. I am just a joke that is finished. That's not entirely true, Isaac said before he could stop himself. She looked up, startled. What do you mean? He rubbed the back of his neck, feeling like he was walking onto thin ice. I mean, you're not alone right this moment. And Stone Creek, folks might surprise you like you did, she asked softly. Taking in a stranger in a storm on Christmas Eve. Just being neighborly, he mumbled again. But the words felt different now, heavier. The snow continued to block the path to town, trapping them together. For 3 more days, the cabin became their entire world. A world that for Isaac was starting to feel less empty and for Mai was starting to feel surprisingly like a sanctuary. The initial awkwardness slowly melted away, replaced by a quiet, comfortable rhythm. Mai insisted on earning her keep. She was a quick learner and surprisingly resourceful. She learned to cook on his cast iron stove, turning his simple supplies into savory meals with the small packet of spices she'd carried in her bag. She mended his work shirts with stitches so fine they were nearly invisible. Isaac, in turn, found himself talking more than he had in years. He told her about the land, about building a life from scratch. She learned he'd taught himself to read from his mother's Bible. He learned she could write in beautiful, complex characters and knew ancient stories from her homeland. One evening, as she was mending a tear in his coat by lamplight, she asked, "Why do you stay here alone, Mr. Thorne?" He poked at the fire. "Tried courting once. A woman from town. She came out to see the place, took one look, and said she'd rather die an old maid than live in a shack." "This is not a shack," Mai said, her voice filled with a surprising indignation. "It is well built and clean. You have made it a home. Simple, yes, but it is warm and safe." The woman was a fool. Isaac felt a warmth spread through his chest that had nothing to do with the fire. Her defense of his life, of the home he'd poured his sweat and soul into, meant more to him than she could ever know. It was in that moment he realized she saw past the rough logs and the simple furniture. She saw the care, the work, the heart of the place. She saw him. "And what did you want?" she asked softly. He met her gaze. Someone who could see past the rough edges. Someone who understood that life out here is hard, but it's worthwhile. Someone real, she repeated, almost a whisper. On the 4th morning, Isaac woke to an unfamiliar silence. The wind had finally died. Weak sunlight streamed through the windows. He found Mai standing at the window watching the sunrise. "It is beautiful," she breathed. "I wish I could see the spring here," she said wistfully, then caught herself. "When the roads are clear, I will go to town, right?" Isaac said, the word tasting like ash in his mouth. He was acutely aware of her standing so close, the way the morning light caught in her dark hair. He'd known this woman less than a week. And yet the idea of her leaving felt like losing a part of himself he hadn't even known was missing. 2 days later, the sound of approaching horses shattered the morning quiet. Isaac looked up to see 3 riders making their way through the snow. He recognized Marcus Fletcher's massive frame immediately, flanked by the town sheriff and one of Fletcher's ranch hands. "Mai," Isaac called, setting down his axe. "Stay inside." She appeared at the doorway, her face draining of color as she recognized the lead rider. "I'll handle this," Isaac said, moving to stand between her and the approaching men. Fletcher reined in his horse, his heavy features set in a scowl. "Thorne," he said, his voice dripping with arrogance. "I hear you found something that belongs to me." "Don't see anything of yours here," Isaac replied, his voice dangerously even. The woman. The Chinese girl. I paid for her passage. She's mine by rights. Mai stepped out onto the porch, ignoring Isaac's warning, her chin held high. I am not property, Mr. Fletcher. You made that clear when you abandoned me in a blizzard. Fletcher's face darkened. Now see here, girl. We had an agreement. You ended the agreement, Mai interrupted, her voice steady. You called it a joke and left me to die. That was a misunderstanding, Fletcher blustered. Heat of the moment. I've reconsidered. Isaac let out a short, harsh laugh. Reconsidered? After leaving her to freeze to death. The sheriff shifted in his saddle. Marcus, what's this about? You told everyone in the saloon it was a Christmas prank. She owes me the price of her passage. Fletcher snarled. $300. She'll work it off one way or another. The threat in his voice made Isaac step forward. That's enough, Fletcher. The lady's not going with you. That's the end of it. This ain't your business, Thorne. Stand aside. I'm making it my business. The sheriff dismounted. Miss. Mai, what do you want to do? The law's murky here, but abandoning someone in that storm. I'm inclined to side with you. I want nothing more to do with Mr. Fletcher, she said clearly. Our business is finished, you little. Fletcher spurred his horse forward, but Isaac was already moving. He grabbed the horse's bridle, pulling Fletcher off balance. Touch her and I'll kill you, Isaac said, his voice quiet but filled with deadly promise. Fletcher's face went purple with rage. You dare threaten me? I own half this valley and not this half, Isaac replied. Now get off my land, the sheriff sighed. Marcus, I've heard enough. The lady's made her position clear. You're lucky she's not pressing charges. I suggest you head home. This isn't over, Fletcher snarled, yanking his horse around. He pointed a finger at Isaac. You think you can keep her, Thorne? A worthless homesteader playing hero. She'll see what you really are soon enough. And when she comes crawling to town, begging for work, I'll be waiting. He spurred his horse viciously and rode off. After they left, Mai sank onto the porch step, shaking. I am sorry, she whispered. I have brought trouble to your door, not your doing, Isaac said firmly. It was about time someone stood up to him. What he said about you, that you have nothing heard worse, Isaac shrugged. And there's truth in it. This cabin, some cattle, it's not what a lady like you is used to. Stop, Mai said, turning to face him. You are worth 10 of Marcus Fletcher. 100. Money does not make a man, Isaac. Character does. The shared danger had broken down the last wall between them. He'll make trouble, Isaac said finally. Might be safer for you in town. Is that what you want? She asked quietly. For me to leave? The question hung between them. Isaac looked at her, at the strength beneath the fear. No, he said, his voice rough. I don't want you to leave. But I've got no right to ask you to stay. Better than a warm home and an honest man, she asked. Better than someone who sees me as a person, not a joke? Who risked Marcus Fletcher's wrath to protect me? Tell me, Isaac, where exactly would I find better than that? He had no answer. He could only stand there as she reached up and gently touched his face. I choose to stay, she said simply. Not because I have nowhere else to go, but because this is where I want to be. With you, if you will have me. His voice broke on her name. People will talk, let them, she said fiercely. I am done living by other people's rules. The only opinion that matters to me is yours. He caught her hand. You know my opinion. Just been too much of a coward to say it. Then say it now, she challenged. I love you, he said, the words raw and true. I think I've loved you since you stood on my doorstep like a half-drowned phoenix. I've got nothing to offer but hard work and uncertain seasons. But if you'll have me, Mai, I'll spend my life trying to be the man you deserve. You already are, she whispered. And rising up on her toes, she kissed him. Word of the abandoned Chinese bride living at Isaac Thorne's cabin spread through Stone Creek like wildfire. Gossip became the town's favorite pastime. Some painted Mai as a fallen woman, others saw Isaac as a thief. When Isaac went to town for supplies, conversations would stop. But not everyone was against them. The local doctor and his wife paid them a visit, bringing a basket of preserves and offering their friendship. Slowly, they began to find allies. Marcus Fletcher, however, was not a man to accept defeat. His final gambit was as cruel as it was clever. A letter arrived for Mai, claiming to be from a shipping agent in San Francisco. It stated that a terrible mistake had been made and her wealthy intended husband was waiting for her there. A ticket, it said, was waiting for her at the bank, paid for by a charitable benefactor. "I have no other husband," Mai said, her face pale. "It's Fletcher," Isaac said grimly. "He wants to trick you into leaving." The plot came to a head in the middle of town. Fletcher was waiting at the bank with a judge he had in his pocket. He publicly presented Mai with the news, feigning shock when she declared the letter a forgery and suggesting the isolation had affected her mind. For a moment, it seemed his lies would win. But then their allies stepped forward. The town reverend demanded proof. The sheriff arrived, revealing he'd sent his own wire to San Francisco. There was no waiting husband, no mistake. The crowd murmured, turning against Fletcher. His deception was laid bare. Humiliated and exposed, Fletcher stormed off, his power over the town broken. That evening, back at the cabin, Mai turned to Isaac. "I think I would like to marry you soon," she said. "Not because of gossip, but because I want to be your wife in truth, not just in my heart." 2 weeks later, they were married under the large cottonwood tree beside the cabin in a simple ceremony attended by the friends who had stood by them. Mai wore a simple cream-colored dress, a gift from the doctor's wife, with wildflowers in her hair. Isaac, his voice thick with emotion, slipped his own mother's wedding ring onto her finger. It was a celebration of a community choosing kindness over cruelty, and a love that had weathered the fiercest of storms. 5 years passed. The cabin grew, with a new room added for their 2 children, a bright-eyed girl named Lily and a toddling boy named Samuel. Mai, once the subject of scandal, was now a respected community leader, helping to organize the building of a new schoolhouse. One afternoon, a rider approached. It was Marcus Fletcher. He looked older, defeated. He had lost his ranch and his fortune. He offered to buy their land, naming a price that would have once seemed like a king's ransom. Isaac just shook his head. "Our home is not for sale." Mai stood beside him, their son clinging to her skirts. "I am thinking of my children," she told Fletcher. "This is their home. This is where they will learn what it means to be good and strong." No amount of money can buy that. Fletcher looked at the family before him, at the love and strength they possessed. "You gave me everything," Mai said quietly. "By leaving me in that storm, you gave me the chance to find my real life. So, thank you, Mr. Fletcher. Thank you for showing me who you were before it was too late." Without another word, he turned his horse and rode away for the last time. That night, as the children slept soundly, Isaac and Mai sat on their porch, watching the stars blanket the Wyoming sky. The cabin that had once sheltered a desperate woman from a Christmas blizzard now sheltered a family, built on a foundation of courage and love. A lonely man had opened his door to a cruel joke and found his soulmate. He had offered simple kindness and received a lifetime of love in return.